Yo, what's going on guys? Arekkz here and welcome back to another Division video, and today I thought we'd do something a little different and take a look back at the story so far. For those of you looking forward to the Division 2, whether you're long-time fans of the series or perhaps someone looking to jump in for the first time, then I thought we'd take a moment to recap what happened in the first game, where it wrapped up, and ultimately the events that will lead us into the Division 2 next year. So here is the story of the Division in 9 minutes. If you do enjoy this video, then a like would be super appreciated, and if you did play the first game, let me know where you'd like to see the story go in number 2. Now, in order to understand what happened within the game and the events that followed, first you need to know about Operation Dark Winter. In 2001, a real-world exercise tested the emergency response to a bioterror attack on the United States, and this operation was called Dark Winter. In a matter of days, the simulation spiraled out of control, with the operation predicting rapid breakdowns of essential institutions, civil disorder, and massive civilian casualties. This was a rude awakening, and just went to show how vulnerable the world had become. Our lifestyle, security, and safety all depends on this delicate and unstable economy. Oil, power, shipping, transport, an infinitely complex mix, yet equally fragile at the same time. This whole system revolves around a global supply chain that meets our everyday needs exactly on time, but this supply chain is built like a house of cards, and if just one of those cards is removed, the whole system comes crashing down. And at the epicenter of this, the fuel if you will, is money. Americans can spend $90 billion in a single day of shopping, and on November 23rd, Black Friday, 200 million people swarmed their local stores, and money is exchanged back and forth at rapid rates, passing from person to person, location to location. This is especially relevant because a flu virus can survive for up to 17 days on a banknote, and one day there will be a pandemic. It could even take place during the busy Black Friday. A pathogen could jump from tainted banknotes to human skin, and from there it could spread to food, public services, children's toys, loved ones, anything. And by the time patient zero begins to feel the symptoms, millions of people will already be infected. And from this point, the breakdown will begin, and it will happen fast. Hospitals will reach capacity and panic will strike. Quarantine zones will be established, resources will be rationed, and transport will go into lockdown. International trade will stop, the oil will dry up, and the stock market will collapse. The power will fail, the shelves will be empty, and the water will run dry. And once this all happens, and people begin to starve, once hunger and despair take hold, people will do anything to survive. And at this point, everyone is a potential threat. So in an attempt to prepare for this, should it ever happen, a presidential directive was signed in 2007, and this maps out the government's response to a crisis. Their plan to cope with a real dark winter, should it ever happen. This is Directive 51. There are rumours of shadow agencies, sleeper cells, and covert agents that live among us, living out their daily lives, ready to react if ever the call is made. Now fast forward to 2015, the moment they all feared, the moment they prepared for, the worst nightmare is about to happen. On Black Friday, a smallpox pandemic transmitted on virus-planted banknotes sweeps through New York City. This disease is referred to as green poison, or sometimes the dollar flu. It causes widespread chaos when it becomes apparent that order was not being maintained and people were being infected in large numbers due to the disorganisation of the NYPD and hospitals. The National Guard, Army and Marine Reserves were called in to assist. The sick were isolated in a quarantine zone in the middle of Manhattan in an attempt to stop the contagion from spreading. Walls were built to keep them contained, and the government activated Directive 51. The sleeper agents mobilised under an organisation known as the Strategic Homeland Division, or the Division for short, and they were dispatched to assist emergency responders, now called the Joint Task Force, or JTF, in restoring order. During the chaos, the Last Man Battalion, a private military company, were hired both to assist the JTF efforts in quarantining the sick, whilst also protecting corporate interests in NYC. Essentially, some prestigious people at Wall Street companies wanted to ensure their valuable papers were protected during the outbreak, but as the crisis worsened, they were abandoned. The LMB also took a much more brutal approach to quarantining the sick, so their methods didn't always align with that of the JTF. Eventually, the LMB and JTF cut ties and began carving out parts of the city for themselves, with the mercenaries taking most of the eastern parts of the city. To make matters worse, prisoners had escaped from Riker Island, killed what few guards remained, and took their equipment, in turn allowing them to take control of the southern part of the city. Sanitation workers that had worked hard to keep the city free of infection and had lost loved ones in the process took to the northeastern part of the city and began to burn everything in sight in their warped attempt to rid the city of the virus once and for all. With everything that was occurring, the JTF were forced to abandon the quarantine zone and the division agents that were assisting them in keeping order. They left everything behind, their best equipment, most powerful weaponry, and their only hope for a cure. All of this left in a heavily contaminated zone, now referred to as the Dark Zone. This in turn created a rift between the government and the first wave of division agents who were left behind and have since abandoned their mission of operating as government agents and instead now sought to take control of the decaying world from the JTF and anybody else. Amidst all of this, one particular name stands out, Aaron Keener. Keener was a first wave division agent, one of those left abandoned in the Dark Zone when the JTF pulled out, and it's fair to say, he didn't take this too well. With a new anti-government perspective, Keener went rogue and began seeking out the first wave agents to join his cause. Any that chose not to join him were murdered in cold blood. Along his journey, Keener met Charles Bliss, the commanding officer of the Last Man Battalion, and he wanted to use them to establish dominance over Manhattan. Meanwhile, Bliss wanted to take advantage of Keener's shade tech to get an advantage over the other factions vying for control of the city. Together, they launched a number of operations against the opposing factions and also the JTF. Having pulled out, the JTF now find themselves at the mercy of these different groups that have formed and are vying for control of the city. The Arekkz, the Cleaners, the LMB, and even smaller gangs of rioters. And this is where we, the player, come in. In light of Keener's actions, a second wave of division agents were deployed. Starting out in Brooklyn, the agents assist the JTF before heading out to explore the quarantine zone with Fei Lao. Arriving in Manhattan in a JTF-commanded helicopter, the division agents set out to reclaim the James A. Farley post office building and establish this as their forward base of operations. From here on out, our journey really begins, embarking on a series of operations to rescue important personnel, restore the base to full working capacity, and combat the criminal groups. Bit by bit, we push back and fight against the opposing forces, taking out their command one at a time. Joe Ferro, former sanitation worker and founder of the Cleaners. When the outbreak happened, his wife succumbed to the virus, and in response to that, he became a psychopathic pyromaniac who believed that the only way to rid the city of the virus was to burn everything and anything. Taking him out weakened the Cleaners' hold on the city and put us one step closer to saving what remains. Lorraine Barrett was the criminal leader of the Rikers. After the Black Friday incident, she took advantage of the chaos and organised the remaining inmates to escape from Rikers Island and make their way to the city. Intent on causing as much chaos as possible, she was the next target on the list. Following her death, the Rikers scattered and fell into disorganisation. And then there's Charles Bliss, commander of the Last Man Battalion. Prior to becoming the commander, he served in the United States Armed Forces and retired before the outbreak to work in the private security sector. Before we continue with his story, let's jump back to the division. Whilst working with the JTF to take back control of the city and gradually restore order, the agents discovered footage of Aaron Keener going rogue and killing other agents, and they also discovered that he was now working with the LMB. Intercepting a signal from the Russian consulate, the agents attempted to rescue Vitaly Chernenko, a Russian virologist who claims to have information on the green poison, but he was kidnapped by Keener and the LMB before they could get there in time. By analysing the virus over the course of the story, Dr. Kandel was able to conclude that the virus was indeed manufactured and weaponized for this very purpose. Keener then abandons the LMB with his fellow rogue agents, and the division agents take down Bliss for good, and his death then sees the remaining LMB splinter among the city and form smaller factions. However, with the city now approaching stability, an unknown signal leads the agents to a secluded laboratory. There they find Dr. Amherst's remains, having been exposed to the virus. Now, Dr. Gordon Amherst was the one that originally manufactured the virus as a means to control the population. He felt that humanity had become too powerful on a global scale, and that Mother Nature needed help in advancing her creations. Humans needed to be put in check, and his dollar flu was the cure. With the breakthrough of digitizing DNA and the process of growing lab-grade pathogens, he obtained smallpox strains from Chernenko and used a 3D biological printer to create the poison. With him now dead, to his own creation, this is where Keener comes in. In the lab where they found Amherst's remains, they also found a message from Keener, stating that he now has the technology to manufacture a new strain of the green poison, and intends to do just that, continue with Amherst's plot. He then offers the player a position at his side in light of their actions in the Dark Zone, an offer we naturally decline, but it's at this point the story comes to a close. Of course, there were a few additional expansions throughout the year, and while they didn't offer any drastic story development, they did give us a glimpse into what some of these splintered factions were up to. Ultimately, they sought out to try and wreak havoc and rise up, but the second wave agents put a stop to that in the process. And that then brings us on to the Division 2. Washington DC is now on the brink of collapse. Lawlessness and instability threaten society, and there are rumours of a coup in the capital, which are further amplifying the chaos. So all Division agents are dispatched to try and restore order before it's too late. Quite whether we'll see the return of Keener will also remain to be seen. But for now, that's a quick update on the story so far. So if you're jumping into Division 2 fresh, or you just wanted a reminder, that is where we're at. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.